Great. Thank you very much, Orly. And really thank you to all who are joining us this afternoon. Welcome to PreVeil's webinar event today. Vince Petrecca, I head up the sales and partner management at PreVeil. And let's do introductions around the horn here. Noelle, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'd love to. And hi, everybody out in the audience today. So I am PreVeil's compliance officer. So I'm responsible for all of our internal and also external compliance. So that includes our FedRAMP internal compliance and also our DoD and ISO and all the different types of external compliances as well.
Very good. And Deirdre?
I'm with HD Manufacturing, also known as HD Machining Solutions. We are a small business doing CNC manufacturing of metal and plastic parts for several industries, primarily aerospace. We do emergency prototype and volume work. I am the business and compliance manager for the company. I wear a lot of different hats, from accounting to marketing, oversee ITAR compliance and system administration.
Very good. Thanks, Deirdre. Really excited to have you join us. Always love to have one of PreVeil's customers on with us. And I think that your situation is going to be very relevant to the discussion today. And so look forward to your insights as we go through. Noelle, great to have you on board as well with us today. And I know that you've been with PreVeil about 2 years now.
Almost 2, yeah.
Almost 2. And it had such a large impact on our own compliance status, as well as the what we're able to offer our clients from a compliance standpoint. I've been with PreVeil going on 6 years now. And looking at the list of participants, I can see that there's several folks that I've had been fortunate enough to interact with in the past. So introductions done. Let's go ahead and get to the topic at hand. So today we want to talk about what to do when you receive a letter. And letter can be a hard copy letter, or it could be an email or some sort of communication from your prime or customer regarding your DFARS compliance status. It could be specific to DFARS 7012. And your compliance with that. It could be terminology around NIST 800-171 compliance, or it could talk somewhat about CMMC in the upcoming CMMC program. We'll talk about more in a minute as well. But interacting with many thousands of customers and people interested in compliance, DoD compliance here at PreVeil, I know that many of our customers have received these, including Deirdre. Here he's with us today. So we want to kind of talk. You receive one of these letters. How can you address that? What do you need to do? What should you do? What's taken into consideration? So that's what we're going to get into today. So I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation, which just help us keep a little more organized with our thoughts today. Okay. And we'll get going. Okay, so first of all, I really want to back up a bit and talk about why these letters are being sent out. I think we've been seeing these really for the last year or two. In particular, these have become much more common. I think it is accelerating in terms of how many we're seeing. Noelle, would you like to kind of explain what's causing, these communications between customers and their subcontractors?
Yeah, absolutely, Vince. I'd be happy to. So just like Vince said, we've been seeing more and more increasingly of these letters. I've definitely seen more of them in prospects and customers. I would say, honestly, it really started picking up that I noticed after the first of this year. So it was right around like January, February, a bunch of people started getting these letters. And they said various different things, like you sort of alluded to, Vince. Most of them were referencing NIST 800-171 compliance and how they needed to address that because the prime was getting pushed down from the government. Well, where does that push down come from? So that's exactly what we're going to review here today, just really quickly. If you do need any additional information on DFARS 7012, 7019, or 7020, please check out our PreVeil YouTube channel. We have something called Compliance Corner where we go in depth on all three of these in specific videos. So I would highly suggest looking out there. But at a high level, DFARS 7012 is a regulation that is in just about every DoD contract, if not all of them at this point. It's been around since December 31st, 2017, and states very clearly that you as a contractor with the United States government have to be NIST 800-171 compliant, which is it consists of 110 different cybersecurity related controls that you need to address in order to work with United States government. DFAR 7019 discusses SPRS, which is the Supplier Risk Management Network. It's a system, excuse me, that the DoD has where you have to actually put in your score, your NIST 800-171 score. And then 7020 is actually where that flow down comes from. So 7012 and 7019 are specific to primes for the most part. 7020 is when it starts discussing that at any point the DoD can ask for an assessment done of your organization. And 7020 also flows down the responsibilities of DFAR 7012 onto suppliers like Deirdre and many others who are sitting out in our audience today. So NIST 800-171 compliance is a necessity today, like I just stated. That is something we cannot overstate. And just to make sure everyone understands, the CMMC assessment process is definitely happening. We know for a fact at this point that the CMMC rulemaking has gone over to OMB. So we are anticipating in the coming weeks, we are going to see for the first time, really for the first time, all that information. So we're at a point right now where even though CMMC is not official yet, it honestly doesn't matter because CMMC is only a certification of NIST 800-171 compliance that everybody is supposed to be doing anyway. And then the other thing just to mention is the June 2023 memo, which actually turned into law earlier this year, which if you haven't read the June 2023 DoD memo, it now is giving more ability for contractors within the government to check up on these types of things before they even award a contract. So, and also before they award, modifications to the contract or anything like that. So it's definitely, there is more pressure coming down on primes. And since we just discussed 7020 is that flow down. So it makes total sense that the primes are now starting to make sure that their supplier network is just as compliant as they are, since they're now starting to get that push down from the government.
Okay, so there's actual pressure coming from DoD groups there, basically onto the primes, the large suppliers that they purchase from, to say, hey, your supply chain needs to meet the compliance requirements that are associated with these existing rules today.
Exactly. And a point to make too is it does not matter what size your company is. It doesn't matter if you are one single individual and you're supplying to one company. It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, the way that this is written, if you are working with that prime now is responsible for you to have that flow down where you have to be NIST 800-171. So it really doesn't matter about size or anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Deirdre, when you got your letter from your customer in this case, what were some of the items that you might see on this list here that were highlighted?
In our case, it was a year ago. It was an email. It was a very simple question. Are you planning to pursue CMMC certification and at what level? And this was summer of last year. We didn't know what CMMC was, and we had to Google it before we could even answer our customer. And
we've all been there, Deirdre. Don't worry.
It was an experience. We were working with UTCIS, which is the University of Tennessee Center for Industrial Services, and PTAC, which is now Apex at the time. And we were asking them, what is this? Our customers asking about this, and we're wondering if this is something we should really have. Is it going to affect us in the future? Blah, blah, blah. And that started the whole process. And we had to make a decision, yes or no. And we decided, yes, we are going to pursue this. That was important to our business long term. Excellent.
No, thanks for that. And Noelle, in terms of, CMMC looming, and I love the word looming there, but in terms of, from your perspective, the NIST 800 controls have been out for quite a while.
Yes.
Do you anticipate anything significantly different when it comes to the initial CMMC program requirements?
That's actually a really great question. So that is something that we've been tracking closely here, on the compliance team at PreVeil, which is, and for anybody who's not aware, NIST 800-171 is currently in its final stages to have the revision 3 come out, which means that the version we're on right now is version 2. for anybody who's not aware. So version 3 in theory should be coming out probably late this year, beginning or early next year. They just closed the comment period last month. So that's usually how that timeline works. So it would not surprise me at all if CMMC were in line with revision 3 of NIST 800-171. Absolutely would not surprise me at all. But since we haven't seen anything official yet, it's hard to sort of tell yet, but it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Right. But the fundamentally, it's going to be continuation of the NIST 800-171 requirements that were dictated many years ago in DFAR 7012.
For anybody who has not looked at the proposed revision 3, it is all of the same 110 controls you're already doing plus another 24. So it's all of this and then more work. So it honestly, I personally think the revision 3 coming out, regardless of when CMMC comes out, the sooner you can get revision 2 set and ready to go, the better off you're going to be. Because like I just said, all of those controls are still there in Rev 3, and Rev 3 is going to come, and it's going to be something you're responsible for. It's just a question of when.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thanks. Thanks, Noelle. So then, you know, this letter, this communication that you get, as Deirdre mentioned, hers was specific to CMMC, which implied the NIST controls because they're innately tied.
Exactly.
But they might ask in this, they might also ask, we've seen many forms of this letter, and sometimes they ask for different things. So Noelle, these are a few of the things, maybe talk through what would be, you know, why these would be included in that request.
Yeah, absolutely. So a status of your SSP, that's the one that I think most of them have something involving the SSP or your system security plan. Like you said, Vince, I've heard of and had conversations with customers and prospects. I've heard varying levels of this. Some primes want to see your full SSP with all of your 800-171 stuff. Other ones just want to know that you have one. You send it, they kind of do like a quick check. It very much depends on the level of how far they're going to dive into it. But I definitely have seen this. The most common is asking for something with your SSP. And then the timeline for closing POAMs, that's the other one that I've seen all over the map. Vince, you and I were talking about this yesterday. I have seen everything from 3 months, which is super, super fast, to a year. But the common one that the most consistent is 6 months that I've seen. So it's usually somewhere in that 3 to 6 month time frame is usually where the consistency is. But that is pretty quick to have to get everything kind of set and done. And then the SPRS score, which your SPRS score is your NIST 800-171 assessment score. There are some suppliers who may be asked to put information into SPRS, and there may be some that aren't. Again, that's another thing that is very much up to, you know, if the prime is like, hey, I need you to do this, then okay. But for the most part, most of the suppliers probably won't have to put anything into SPRS, but they will need to have a score that they can give to their prime and say, yeah, we're 90 out of 110. That's the other thing that I've seen very consistently as well, is a score specific. Most of the letters that I have talked to customers about have been somewhere between like 88, which is the 80%, 90%, whatever it is, line that we have in the cap, up to all the way to a full 110. I have definitely seen some primes who are like, nope, we're not taking anything less than 110, which is a lot. Right.
Although even in those cases, they would assume that there's a timeline to get there, right? No one assumes this is going to happen immediately.
Yeah, sometimes there aren't. Again, sometimes I have talked to 1 or 2 people who, one person I talked to who had a letter, it was 6 months, and it was 6 months to get it all done. You had to be 110 at the end. I mean, there were no POAMs, nothing. It had to be done at 6 months. So yeah, it really, I've seen it all over the map, but these 3 things seem to be relatively consistent. You know, what is your score, how long you have to close everything, and something with your system security plan.
Right. So very important items. We'll come back to these later in terms of, you know, how to address these as well. But I just wanted to kind of point out that these are the key things that are showing up in these letters. Let's move on. So, you know, I think what we've come to realize is there's 2 groups of subcontractors out there today that support the Department of Defense. Group 1 is those that have received a letter like this. They got an email, they got a letter, they've been given some sort of notice as to what is needed when. The second group are simply those that will soon get a letter. There's really not a third group that is never going to see a letter. It's just kind of immune to this. If you were
does not appear that way, definitely.
if you're handling sensitive data, particularly CY, ITAR, et cetera, for the US government, at some point, your customer, your prime is going to insist that you meet these requirements, the DFAR 7012, the NIST 80171, be prepared for a CMMC assessment. So for those of you out there that have already received this letter, obviously we'll go into more details on that now in a minute. For those that have not, it's just a matter of time. And this is a chance to get ahead of that, as we head into the latter part of 2023 and very looming and pending announcements around the CMMC program. Okay, so let's move on to what to do now. So what should you do when you get this letter? And of course, as in most situations, the answer is going to be, it depends. I think with Deirdre and HD Manufacturing Company, right? Your situation was that you were very new to this compliance area. You had to learn. You had to learn, figure out what you need to do. It all took some time, et cetera, to ingest that, determine a path forward. We'll get more to your, where you went with that in here in a little while. But that, I guess the answer is it depends. And Noel, maybe you can help us with the key questions to ask, when you first get this, or as you look ahead to probably receiving this, what do you want to be prepared for?
Yeah, I think, well, it's a great question, Vince. And I love hearing Deirdre's experience of, I had to Google CMMC. I also did not know what CMMC was when I first started in this. So my heart went out to you. I remember that moment for myself vividly. Yeah, so it's an amazing moment when you're like, what is CMMC?
Just for context, so before Noel joined PreVeil a couple of years ago, she was with a firm that used PreVeil that also went through the process of becoming fully NIST 80171 compliant.
Yes. And I was the one who was tasked with that wonderful joy that is compliance and implementing it at a company. It is no small feat by any stretch of the imagination. And Deirdre, my heart is with you, truly, as it is with everyone on this call who has to go through this, because it is not an easy thing. It's not easy. We're trying to make it as easy as we can, though. So yes, I think that these questions are really valid ones. Do you have a DFARS compliant? That's a great question, right? Actually, I would even just say, do you have a DFARS compliant anything? This could be a situation where you're a subcontractor, you get told this, you get this letter, and then it suddenly occurs to you, wait a minute, and I've had this happen before with customers, wait a second, I have a prime contract with the DoD. Maybe I should probably look at that too. So first and foremost, please look at your contracts before you get anywhere near any of these. Look at your contract. I cannot stress this enough. Your contract with your prime, your contract with the government, if there is one. Look at that, read it, understand it. Look at all the horrible little clauses that nobody wants to pay attention to. Look at everything. After you do that and you realize where you're at from that standpoint, from a contractual standpoint, that you need to start looking, okay, do we even understand what CMMC is? In Deirdre's case, what does that even mean? I don't even know what that is. Have I ever heard of NIST 80171? Do I know what that means? And then do I have a solution that's compliant? And I love that we put DFARS compliant, not CMMC, not NIST, DFARS compliant. That's a different thing. So the difference for those of you out there who do not understand, when we're talking about DFARS compliant, we're talking about specifically DFARS 7012 compliance, which states that you have to have a compliant platform on a multitude of levels, not the least of which is having either FedRAMP authorized or equivalent. But the big one that a lot of companies will not be able to give you is an attestation letter stating that they will support you in the case of any sort of incident, that like a security incident that happens. It's known as DFARS 7012 paragraph C through G. So if you do not have a solution that gives you a letter that states, yep, we are with you and we will 100% support you for C through G, you likely don't have a DFARS compliant solution. So you should probably look into that. Do you have a comprehensive SSP with policies and standard operating procedures? This is usually the biggest one that trips up pretty much everyone, because it's so large and so looming. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more about our solutions for that in a moment. And then, do you have internal compliance expertise or a relationship with someone who can do that? This is a huge one. If you have, like in my case, I have an IT heavy background. it was still very difficult for me to get into compliance. It is a different language. It really is. It's a very specific way of looking at things. So this is something, this third one I think is incredibly imperative, is to really be honest with yourself, as honest as you can. Do we need help? You know, is there someone external that we need? Is there someone internal that can do this? You really want to be as honest as you can with yourself. And when you make that decision as to who that internal person's going to be, make sure that they understand what they're signing up for.
Yeah. And Deirdre, it sounds like in your first 3 to 6 months following receipt of your letter that you went through the process of asking these questions, right? As you learn more and more, yes, you ask these questions. So maybe just give us a little color on how you went through that process.
We're lucky because of our partnerships with UTCIS and PTAC. They introduced us to MEP, which is the Tennessee Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And by October, we were in a day-long training over in Knoxville, learning about CMMC and what it really was and what it meant to our business. It helped us make the decision about whether or not to move forward. And we were eligible for a grant. It's not an inexpensive process to go through. Mm-hmm. And we are a small business. So we took advantage of that grant, and we were connected with Boston Government Services, or BGS, to help us through the process. They did our initial gap assessment last fall, so that we could see where the issues were at, and there were many. In our environment. And since then, we are moving forward with development of the SSP. We are in the early stages of reviewing the policies and procedures and going through that process right now, but at least we have a roadmap now. We can see the future. You know, we'll get through this process, start developing evidence, and go through a mock assessment, and then eventually an assessment. So we're probably next year before we get through all of that, but it's a
process, right? This isn't something you do in a weekend.
It takes a while.
You're not doing this in a weekend.
You know, and we're a small company. So you talk about internal expertise, a relationship, somebody to work with. So we do have someone who's teaching us through the process. Because we're a small business, there is a lot that we can do for ourselves. But, you know, at some point, I do see us having to outsource some of the task that will take place ongoing to manage the evidence that's needed to support this.
That's absolutely understand that. And that's part of the process, part of the ecosystem. We'll talk more about that as we go into this. This is not, there's no point solution here. You really need to have a comprehensive view of what it's going to take to maintain, to become compliant and then maintain that compliance.
It's ongoing. Yes.
Yes. Ongoing thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go on. Okay. So, hey, you know, if you don't have this all figured out yet, you're not alone. It's common that people are struggling with this, whether they've gotten this letter yet or they're soon to get the letter, they're struggling with how to address this. But in either case, if you're subject to DFAR 7012, NIST 800-171 today, whether you have a letter today regarding that compliance or something about CMMC, the next steps are fairly clear. Number one, if you actually have data today that needs to be protected per the DFARS clause, you need to protect that as soon as possible per the requirements. You need to have a DFARS compliant platform that meets exactly what Noelle was talking about, those requirements. You can do that in-house. That's a challenging proposition for some to manage that on premise. But there's certainly cloud service providers like PreVeil that can support that as well and help you meet your requirements. We'll talk about that more in a minute. The second thing is really getting a jump start on that compliance documentation challenge, the SSP, the policy documents, your standard operating procedures, your artifacts that show that you are living up to the policies that you have set for your organization. It is a challenge, and there's ways to get a jump start on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. And then finally, you know, filling the gaps. Deirdre, thanks so much for giving those examples of sort of the Tennessee MEP Boston Government Services. What you're doing is you're filling the gaps in your organization's compliance knowledge base and coming up with a path that works for you to get where you need to be. Most small, medium businesses are not going to have the full slate of expertise within their organization today to do this all by themselves. So it's really adding that. Whether that expertise comes from a company like PreVeil, who has a team, including folks like Noel and other CMMC certified professionals on staff, or third parties like Boston Government Services or your MEP. All right, so I'd like to just provide a little information on what to do next and how PreVeil could fit into that for you. So as we've mentioned, I think we've pretty clearly laid out the three challenges here in terms of what you need to address. And at PreVeil, I think we've worked very hard over the last 3 to 4 years to orient our business model so that we can support small, medium businesses or enclaves for larger companies that can meet the compliance requirements as quickly, easily, and as cost effectively as possible. And it's a lot more than the PreVeil platform itself, as secure and elegant as that platform is. So, here's the three key components of our offering. We have the PreVeil DFARS 7012 compliant platform. It meets the FIPS encryption requirements. It meets the FedRAMP requirements. It meets DFARS C through G, which allows us to report on incidents, allows us to ensure that all media is preserved in the event there is something that needs to be reviewed by the DoD. It's extremely easy to deploy, and it covers you for CY, ITAR, export controlled content, etc. But the offering is a lot more than that. So we'll get into detail, and we'll let Noelle go into this in a minute. She's going to give you really a run through on what we can offer from a documentation and compliance education standpoint. Really valuable. As we mentioned, there's going to be many documents you'll need here. It's more than just the SSP. The SSP needs to be supported by policy documents, standard operating procedures that your employees follow, artifacts that show that you're living up to the requirements of NIST and CMMC. We can help with that all as well. And then finally, PreVeil has an extensive partner community, including certified registered practitioners and who are the advisors out there, and C3PAOs. Those are the assessors. Sometimes there's folks that do both of those things as well in the marketplace that you can work with. And, because PreVeil has worked with some of these folks, you can work with folks like Boston Government Services who are very familiar with PreVeil. They understand our security model. They know how we secure the data. They understand how we meet the DFARS requirements. They're familiar with the controls we cover, and we help support 102 of the 110 NIST controls. It really helps accelerate your process. From a usability perspective with PreVeil, we've tried to make it as easy as possible so it integrates, very cleanly into your existing work processes. We have both PreVeil Mail and PreVeil Drive. PreVeil Mail is seamless encrypted messaging that can be interfaced directly with your Outlook mail client. So you can use this right in Outlook. We also have a browser view. We've even got a mobile device access as well that can be managed in a compliant fashion. Secure document collaboration through PreVeil Drive is integrated right into File Explorer. We also have a browser portal that you can use for reviewing and sharing PreVeil Drive content. And you can even view PreVeil content from Drive on your mobile device too. That's all included in the PreVeil offering. You can operate this with Microsoft Commercial 365. You can maintain your existing commercial Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace environment. Simply use PreVeil, as a parallel secure network with everything stored in the FedRAMP High Impact AWS Gov Cloud that's related to your sensitive data. And as you can see below, we support all the environments: Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, and even Linux variants. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to turn the wheel over to you, Noelle, to give us a tour of the PreVeil compliance packages and our education modules. Again, this is going to include pre-filled customized SSP, CRM, customer responsibility matrix, and policy documentation content. We're going to have educational videos that we've done in tandem with our C3PAOs. And you're going to have, as a customer prevails, you would get support anytime, Q&A support from our CMMC certified professionals, CCPs, that we have on staff, including Noel and others. So Noel, with that, I'm going to turn the share to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Vince. So really quick before we dive into this. So what I'm going to be showing everybody is actually walking through a specific control. So we're going to look at it sort of from the viewpoint of what an assessor might be looking for, and also, you know, from the viewpoint of, as the OSC or the organization seeking certification, what kind of things should you be looking at as well? So the control we picked was 3.3.2. And for those of you out there who are not just immediately familiar with what that control entails, it's from the audit and accountability family. And the control is ensure that the actions of individual system users can be uniquely traced to those users so they can be held accountable for their actions. It sounds very simple, right? Okay, if a user does something, I need to be able to track it. That's pretty much at a very high level what it is. So the first thing we're going to do is if I am a PreVeil customer, or even if I'm not, if I'm a customer of someone else, if I have some other external service provider in some way that would be supporting this, I would go to that customer responsibility matrix. Sometimes it's called a shared responsibility matrix. They're all very similar. So this happens to be the version that we have for our assessors. And you notice that I already have audit and accountability 3.3.2 right here. This is the control we just talked about. And as we go over here, this would be where the company would put their implementation status, meaning how are they implementing this specifically? Because as Vince mentioned, it's always different, right? Everything is always a little bit different. We have some assumptions up here that are important to read. But essentially, if all of these assumptions are met, you know, basically, is PreVeil being used correctly? You know, are you managing your endpoints? Are you actually doing your due diligence? Then we have here, if you see here, implementation status would be PreVeil inherited, which means that PreVeil would take on the responsibility of that control. That does not mean, just because it says inherited from any company, that does not mean that you suddenly don't have to do anything. Just because it says inherited. If it says inherited, you're still responsible for policy, procedure, you're still responsible for making a statement. PreVeil inherits it. This is how it happens, etc. But yes, what it means though, from a technical standpoint, we are going to cover that. So now let's say for the sake of argument that it didn't say PreVeil inherited here. Maybe it says customer responsibility. So then we also have what we call a plan of actions and milestones, or a POAM, which has all of the individual controls and down to the objectives even that we do not cover. So the 108 controls that we support, some of those in there have shared responsibility where the customer may have some things they need to do on some objectives and we have, you know, responsibility on others. Those individual objectives that in those shared are also on here as well. So this is another piece of information. This also addresses one of the controls in NIST 800-171, which requires you to track POAM items. And you'll see here all the information that should be tracked. And there's even a handy dandy little scoring option right here as you go through and you're like, oh, you know, this is completed. And because this happened to be a SPRS score of 1, it went up. If I go back and say not started, it goes back down. So just a handy little tool for everybody. So, okay, well, now we know that it's PreVeil inherited. We know we don't have to put it on the POAM. We probably need to look at the policies that we have. So let's go ahead and let me just shut down Excel really quick. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is go into your policies or your procedures, which is what we're going to do next. So the next thing you're going to see here is our PreVeil policy. So this happens to be the PreVeil audit and accountability policy template. And you see here 3.3.2 is the control that we're talking about. And it states this is what the company is going to be. They will ensure this. You notice that this is very high level. There's not a whole lot of information. Something to think about is that policy is sort of, this is what we say we are going to do. This is the statement of, yes, we're going to do this. It doesn't tell me how I'm doing it. It doesn't give me individual information on who's going to be responsible for actually accomplishing this. None of that. It's just, this is what we are going to do. So that's piece one of when an assessor comes in and looks at this specific control, what are they going to most likely look at? So now we see here that it's stating here, yep, we ensure that all of our audit information will have this at a minimum. because remember, we have to make sure that we define everything we're actually going to be tracking in that audit log, and then making sure that we can actually associate all that information back to a user. You see here, user or process identified. Okay, so in the policy, we've stated what we need to do. Well, now what does that mean from a more action sort of level? Okay, we've said what we're going to. Now let's go over to our SSP. This is the standard operating procedure we talked about earlier. This is, again, the PreVeil SSP template. You see 3.3.2 highlighted here, ensuring the actions of individuals. You see here, we actually restated the policy in this case, which is totally fine, but there's more information below. And you notice there's a lot of information about PreVeil. Since this is actually a PreVeil template, we went ahead and did all of the PreVeil part of the work on this as much as we can. Now you see here, there's multiple places where it's sort of in bold or in brackets. That means there is something there that you probably need to pay attention to, insert a location here or some additional information. You see here, inserting a copy of our white paper, etc. And then if there was another system that you needed to include for whatever reason, you could put that information here, and there's guidance there as well. So now we have a better understanding of how, but okay, well, if this is what I'm doing and I'm tracking all this information, well, how am I going to get all that information? Where am I going to look to find it? If I'm a brand new person at this company, I'm going to look at this SSP and say, wow, this sounds really great. I am so glad that I get to go ahead and look at audit logs. It's my favorite thing to do. Everybody loves it. But how am I going to look at audit logs now? This doesn't tell me that. And as an assessor, I want to know that you have something that makes a repeatable process. So the idea being that if, God forbid, I got hit by the lottery train tomorrow, I would be able to leave and there would be information for somebody to pick it up and go ahead and move forward. So now we have, yes, this is what we're saying we're going to do. We have a little bit of information on how we do it. Now let's actually look at some of those artifacts that we have from the PreVeil offering, from the PreVeil University offering that we have. Everything we've seen right here so far has been from our, what we call our base level compliance documentation package. Now, if this is where you're at, that's fantastic. But what if you're in the situation like where Deirdre was, and she had to Google what CMMC was and has no idea what's going on? Well, for those types of customers, and also for customers who are really just looking for more information, since this is very overwhelming for a lot of people, including myself, it definitely was. What we did is created PreVeil University. So PreVeil University is sort of that next step up. And you'll see here, it's SOPs, so we're calling them standard operating procedures. This is the how. This is the, I give this to you, brand new IT person, you're going to do audit logs, and I walk away. Well, hopefully that's the theory. So every one of the SOP documents in PreVeil University, and I think we have 30 or 31 or something like that at this point, we're in that general area. And by the way, we are constantly adding to that because we keep getting feedback from customers and C3PAOs like, hey, this is another thing that would be nice to have. So it's not just the stuff that you necessarily have to have. There's a lot of nice to have stuff that's in there as well too, because we want to make sure that you have as much information as possible to make it as easy as you can through an assessment. So each one of them, states here, this note at the top is essentially saying what I already said, which is you have to still do your due diligence. We invented a fake DIB company, a small DIB company. I think there's 20 employees total. You can kind of read it here. 5 of those employees happen to have, or I think 7 of them actually have CUI access. They also have one locker, a physical CUI, like paper CUI that they have at their headquarters, just as a high level. And they are running Microsoft 365 commercial. There's some additional information on this one here. There's an executive authority. This is what each one of them has. Executive authority is exactly what it sounds like. It is your executive, CEO, CIO, whoever it happens to be, saying, yes, I am giving the ability to execute what is going on within this to these people who are listed here. This would be signed. You have a version history, general information, and then we've got all kinds of information internally here. And you notice, oh, look, here we are. This is where I'm going to be collecting those audit logs from. Now I know, okay, these are the different systems that I need to do that for this company. You notice PreVeil is definitely on that list. So as we go through, this is exactly what is going to be looked at. So these are the items that are going to be reviewed when reviewing the audit logs for 365. These are the items we're going to be looking at. And you see an entire list of exactly what that looks like, what explanations of those things, and then a walkthrough of exactly how to do that. Screenshots, information on, tips on how to do things, etc. And then we also have it obviously for PreVeil, and the same thing. You see here, these are the things that you're going to be looking for. Here's some actions and descriptions. So these are the action codes within the PreVeil administrative logs and what that actually means. And then we also have a walkthrough of how to do it. So if I'm a brand new IT person and this happens to be a CUI enclave situation, and I'm told, hey, you're going to have CUI access, you're also going to be a PreVeil administrator, you're also going to do all this audit logging, I can now pick up the SOP documentation, the SSP, the policy, and then also the SOP, and have a full holistic understanding of what my job is actually going to entail. And that does a couple of things. One, it makes the assessor who reads all this feel very comfortable that you know what you're doing with this control. And it also helps your employees feel a little bit more safe too, that, oh, okay, well, I know what's going on. I know what to expect. And I know there's a reference place in case I forget anything.
That was great. Thanks, Noel, for running through that for a specific control like that. I think that made it really clear. And I want to just dive into a couple things. One is, you mentioned sort of it's customized for a PreVeil client, right?
Yes.
So all the information that we could put in that is relevant to the PreVeil parts of it are included in all these documents, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And these documents are really easy. That we have it all set up actually in the system. This is just, obviously it's, just a very high level understanding, but this is our learning management system that we have for PreVeil University, because it's not just those files, which you'll see if I go to files, there's a whole litany of all the files here. But if I actually look here, there's also videos in here. So you notice that there is one for audit and accountability. If I click it, it will start playing and making loud noises. So I'm not going to do that, but you have a video. So each one of these videos, as you alluded to earlier, Vince, each one of these videos, we talk about usually 2 to 3 different controls, depending on the family. And they're the top other than satisfied controls according to DIBCAC. So it's for each family. I took the top 2 or 3 and said, okay, well, how would we do that? And what we just did here, where I walked through that solution, that's exactly what we do on the videos. We walk through, okay, well, how do these solution sets support this? What does that actually mean? What is that control really talking about? And then on top of that, at the end of each of these videos, you have a conversation with one of our C3PAO clients, like BGS actually is on one of them. So we have a bunch of amazing C3PAO partners who are just wonderful and volunteered their time to have conversations about those controls for each family. So at the end of the video, there's about 15 to 25 minute conversation with myself and one of our C3PAOs who is discussing how would they assess this? What are they looking for? What kind of evidence do they want to see? And also, what kind of stuff do they see that they don't want to see? What kind of mistakes and missteps have they found?
Okay.
So this is an absolute wealth of information and education, truly.
That is really amazing that's all put together and customized like that. Another thing I just want to point out, because I know, is that you haven't just kind of developed all this and said, well, we believe this is good enough to meet the requirements. What sort of vetting have we done to ensure that this content really will pass muster from an authorized C3PAO?
Such a good question. I get it all the time. So we've had, I've actually worked with a few of our C3PAO partners on this. I've actually very much worked very closely with a lot of them. A couple of our different CCAs, if you're not familiar, it's a CMMC certified assessor. This information we definitely have done our due diligence on that. And we also don't just give this to you and then let you fly away by yourself either. So that's another thing that Vince alluded to in his last slide, talking about, there is also support. So let's say that you get all of this amazing information, and this happens all the time, and a customer is like, I have no idea where to start and I don't know what I'm doing. What do I do next? We have compliance. We have the offering for customer compliance calls. We also have a compliance email alias that we are constantly answering questions. I mean, I get some amazing questions from customers every single day. They get more and more interesting every day, I swear. And then all of our customers who have those compliance documentation bundles can just schedule time with myself or one of the other members of our compliance team to ask questions, because sometimes an email isn't enough, right? Sometimes you need to have a whole conversation, especially when it comes to compliance. So that's also included as this as well.
Great. And Deirdre, I know that the compliance documentation that PreVeil provided for you has been used by your partners as well, right? BGS?
Yes. We implemented PreVeil before we started down that route. I apologize for that.
You got to love when things are live, right?
Exactly. We are a working office here.
Yep.
we started down that we implemented PreVeil before we started down the route with BGS. Actually, BGS had referred PreVeil to us, and once we saw the presentation, we knew it was going to be a really good fit for us. We were managing CUI in-house separately, but we had other documentation that was being managed on another file type server elsewhere, which was not very secure. And we needed everything all in one place. And we needed it to be secure. And PreVeil was definitely the solution for us. It's been very user-friendly. We did purchase the documentation, and we asked BGS to incorporate that with what they were doing for us.
That's terrific. I mean, that's really a great use of the ecosystem, Deirdre, to help you do this faster and easier. And so just a great example from that perspective. Terrific. Well, let me just wrap up with a couple more slides, and then we can go and maybe we'll have time for a few minutes of Q&A here before we're done. So let me share my screen one more time. Okay, so we just talked about this. Thank you, Noel. So just the third kind of leg of the stool, as we like to say, in terms of compliance, again, filling those knowledge gaps. We've talked about this a bit, so we'll make this short. But you know, you've gotten so far. You knew you needed to be CMMC or NIST 800-171 compliant. You deployed your platform, immediately secure your data in a DFARS compliant manner. Secure it from attack is most important, right? You're protecting our nation's data here. You've then got access to the real content to generate, you know, the documentation you need to support your SPRS score that you want to make as high as possible. You know, in parallel with that or after that, you could work with a PreVeil certified registered practitioner or an authorized C3 PAO like Boston Government Services, who are already trained in PreVeil, understand our model, understand the documentation, and have probably been involved in vetting our documentation themselves. Think how much faster that's going to make the review and assessment process that they go through, which is going to save you a lot of money. So that's really powerful. I just want to show one thing real quick, if I can pull it up. You know, the PreVeil partner webpage, this is available on our website. You know, you can check out our partner network. We have many partners, and every month more and more of our partners are becoming certified or preferred partners, and you can access them right here. You want to find PreVeil certified consultant, you can pull them up right here. They're located across the US. Let me go back here. There we go. And we have a similar page for our C3 PAOs. So again, right there, if you want to go take a look, feel free to go to the PreVeil website, do look at our partner heading, go to find a partner, and you can look at all the partners that are already certified and have been trained fully on the PreVeil documentation package. So, you know, as a takeaway from this, and I know many of these folks in this call are already engaged in some way with PreVeil, which is great. We appreciate that. You know, please, if you have questions on this, we'll try to respond to them now or very shortly after this meeting, but feel free to contact your existing account manager at PreVeil, someone that you might be working with. If you're interested in talking to PreVeil, you can send an email to sales@preveil.com. You can also click contact sales on our website. So just go to the PreVeil website, PreVeil, and click contact sales, and we'll be in touch with you immediately. If you're a partner of ours and want more information about any of this content, of course, reach out to your partner manager. And if you're interested in becoming a partner, simply go to our website, go to our partner tab, and you can fill in information to become a partner. We'd be happy to have you join us. So I'm going to stop share there. And just before we wrap up, Deirdre, anything else you want to share about your experience, you know, achieving what you have with PreVeil and our partner community, our documentation?
PreVeil, we needed a end-to-end encryption, file sharing, and email platform, most definitely. And I wish we had known about PreVeil a long time ago. It's been a very, very good fit. It's easy to use. We bring on a new employee, it's easy to train them on, and the support is very good. The response is always same day. It's very quick. So it's been a good move for our business and cost effective. So we're pleased with it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We look forward to continuing working with you through the compliance journey and ensuring that you are successful with that, because that ultimately is what this about and and we understand that long game. So,
Definitely. It's a platform that you can grow your business on.
right.
And as a small business, that's important to us. We don't need to be making changes and moving. We need to find a place to stay and grow our business. So
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Orly, are you still there? Are there any questions that we can answer in our last few minutes?
And I've been actively ignoring you guys and answering Q&A while we're.
Yeah, we've got quite a few of them, it looks like.
Yeah,
It looks like we have about 33 questions here. I'm not sure how many we'll get to.
Any high runners that you've seen multiple times?
Well, each is unique and completely different, to quote, to turn a phrase. But let me just get through some that seem kind of relevant to the greater audience. So one, let's just starting up at the top. So one person asked, how deep is the flow down for 720? If I'm a sub, am I required to flow down to my subs?
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. And I'll take this one just because it's a dicey one. It's a dicey one. That's actually a really great question. I've started hearing more rumblings about people saying we should go all the way down, to the bottom kind of situation with supply chain management. I have still heard many C3POs who are like, well, the prime should only have to go down one level, maybe 2 levels down. There is not that I have seen a solid answer to this yet, but I would say if you are a prime and have subcontractors and you do not know if they are 800, 171, you need to find out. All of them. Go all the way down. It's better to be safe on this than not.
All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Deirdre, you have a fan club here. People are wanting your answers to a couple questions. But let me start with this one. So this one woman asked, says she'd like to hear Deirdre's answers on a couple of things. One is, was DFARS in her contract before, and they were just not aware, which is quite common. And 2, did they get information about what parts were CUI? As we well know, many primes will flow down the requirements, even if the parts are not CUI. So why don't we start with that first question of, was DFARS in your contract before and you just weren't aware? Which is quite common.
We're not privy to the contract. We are not a prime. We are several tiers down. We are ITAR registered, and so the jobs that would come to us are ITAR required, and so we are ITAR compliant, and we had to provide our registration letter and show that it was current and so forth. As far as CUI, up until very recently, the documentation that was coming to us wasn't even marked as being CUI. Now we're starting to see that, and we're handling it appropriately in our environment. And of course, with PreVeil, we can do that. So that's pretty much where we're at in the process right now. We have not received that formal letter that says, where are you with your SSP? Can you send us a copy? But we fully expect that to happen at some point.
Noel, will most, I'm sorry, dear.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So will most ITAR fall into the CUI category, Noel, generally?
Yeah, so ITAR is actually a subcategory of CUI. So yeah, it definitely, yeah, it has its own very special, unique little characteristics and things, but yes, it technically is under the CUI umbrella. Yep.
So I know there's occasionally situations where ITAR is actually not, like there are some situations where it
there's
falls outside.
so many little nuances. ITAR is one of those weird ones where I would definitely suggest looking at your contract. That's another time to look at your contract. But yeah.
But most of the time, you can
Yes.
assume that it could be CUI. Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah.
very good.
I,
Thanks.
I will say, if a job comes to us and DFARS is something that's very specific in their contract and we need to know about it, they are going to tell us about it.
Okay,
It's going to be part
Good
of the
to know.
requirements of the PO that comes to us.
very good. Do we have time for one more, Orly?
Yes. All right. So here's one. What if you suspect that you are receiving CUI? In some cases, Prime is marked it so, but you don't get anything marked with CUI markings. Sorry, that's a little confusing.
So the
You
Prime is
suspect you're
saying,
receiving CUI, but it hasn't been marked.
okay, so the Prime is saying this is CUI, but it doesn't say CUI on it from the government. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and
Okay.
should you ignore it? Should you?
So this is a situation where we have a very interesting situation when you come out of the Prime to the sub from a contractual legal standpoint. Whatever the agreement is with the Prime with the government is obviously not the same as the agreement that's going to be between, two commercial companies. So it really does depend on what you have in your contract with the Prime company. So that's where you need to make sure that you're answering everything in that communication between them. If they state in there that, if I give you something as CUI, you have to treat it that way, and that's what the contract says, then it's done.
Whether it's marked or not.
Whether it's marked or not, it does not matter. You will treat it that way. Now, but you also, depending on the relationship you have with your Prime, you can also ask that question, ask the question, hey, sometimes I'm getting CUI things from you that you're saying are CUI, but I don't see any markings. I know that it has to be an agency in the government to decide something CUI. What am I missing? Have that conversation with them too, because that subcontracting company is going to be held responsible if there is some kind of security incident with CUI. So it definitely behooves you to make really sure with your Prime and look at that contract you have with them.
And quite frankly, when appropriate, err on the conservative side.
Definitely.
If something
Yes.
could be CUI, sensitive
Definitely.
data, ITAR, et cetera, assume it is.
Yes.
Put that into a secure platform, protect it per your compliance documentation, et cetera. What's the
Absolutely.
worst case? You protected something that didn't need to be fully
Exactly.
protected.
It's
a
so
lot
much
better than the alternative.
That's actually been our
Definitely.
policy.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're not sure, just treat it as CUI.
That is something that I tell customers all the time. I'm glad you brought that up, Vince. Yes, if you take nothing away from this, just err on the side of caution.
Exactly.
And one
Great.
last question for you, Deirdre. A couple people are wondering about this. What is the name of the grant that you received? I think a lot of people are kind of interested in seeing if they can qualify for something similar.
It was through, I don't know the exact name, actually. If I can get that and send that to you orally, I'll look it up. It was through the Tennessee Manufacturing Extension Partnership.
So that your MEP, your
Yeah,
MEP.
yeah.
And I think other MEPs have access to those grants too.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah.
We-
Every state, or just about, I believe every state
Every
actually
state, and some have
every
multiple.
state, and some have multiple, have small business, grants like this specifically for this type of stuff. If you look in, I know I'm in the state of Virginia. I have definitely worked with the Virginia office with that stuff, and it's relatively easy to get those grants usually. I mean, I don't know how it was for you, Deirdre, but it was pretty simple when I had to do that.
It was very easy for us. We it was presented to us. Would you like to do this?
But it's like, yes, I would love free money. Thank you.
Free
So
money. No, I don't want free money.
I don't want free money.
If you're a small business, I would definitely pursue this. I would get to know your local MEP, PTAC. If you've got a Center for Industrial Service in your state, find out who they are and connect with them and talk to them about this.
There's also local municipalities and counties that will have those grants as well. So that's something else. If you're in a bigger county, it may be county specific as well.
Yes.
I was going to say, PreVeil works with many customers that have relationships with their local MEP. We have partnerships with many of them.
Yep.
So feel free to contact us too if you need some direction with your local map. We can probably assist you.
Good.
All right. We're about a minute ahead of time, over time. I'm conscious of everyone's schedules. Thank you so much to everyone who joined today's webinar. Thank you to Noelle, to Vince, and most importantly, thank you to Deirdre for jumping on and
Glad to be
telling us
here.
a little bit about her company and her situation. I'll leave it to you, Vince, to sign off then.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Orly. And just to be clear, you have the questions. Can we follow up with some of those afterwards with folks? I want to make sure
Absolutely.
people aren't
Yeah.
left hanging on that. So we will be
Fortunately,
following
we did
up.
not get to all 40.
No, no. Thank you for participating and for the questions. We will get back to you. And again, please reach out to PreVeil at any time if we can help you with your compliance journey. That's what we wake up every morning looking forward to doing with you. So thanks, Noelle. Thanks, Deirdre. Thanks, Orly. And have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.